Quite an interesting trip this morning. A full load on the Lurleen, some 740 passengers who have come to visit our island. Hey there, who are you?
Merritt Sher.
Merritt what?
Merritt Sher.
Where are you from, Merritt?
Los Angeles.
Yeah, what are you doing in Hawaii?
Cold pleasure trip.
Yeah, good. Well, I hope you'll have a lot of pleasure from it.
I think I will.
Where do you go to school up there?
At Emerson Junior High School.
What business your dad in?
Real estate.
Merritt is the man that didn't care what anybody else thought or said.
What I learned from Merritt is the artistry is the most important part, the creativity. So he's the guy that gave me license to do what I really love to do, and I'm just forever grateful.
And basically, I guess he quote unquote saw something in me. So, you know, if it wasn't for him, who knows what I would be doing today.
You've been more meaningful to me than I think you know. And while it's hard for both of us to say things that are emotional, I do want you to know how important you've been in my personal life and how important you've been in my career. You're one of the kindest people I've ever met, and I mean, to know that someone can be successful and kind is such a wonderful thing to look up to.
I want to thank you for being such a positive impact on my life and for spreading the light and for everyone that you encounter.
Just like the guest of honor.
Okay, we're going to start, and what I wanted to do was kind of start at the very start, which is actually before Pteronomics. We invited Mike Epstein. Yes, I know, the enemy. Anyway, so he couldn't come. He apologized. He wrote something that triggered the read, and it really is a big.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for stepping up and covering the bill today. That's a wonderful letter that Mike wrote. I just want to share it with everyone. I really owed Merritt a lot. My first connection to the Sher family was when I met his father at a strip center he owned in Costa Mesa sometime in the early 60s. At that meeting, I remembered that there was a sheer lane that dead-ended into Edinger Avenue. Later, I believe still in the 60s, I met a broker who represented Arby, and his name was Merritt Sher. A friend of mine, Richard Hirsch, who went to high school, knew this guy, his brother and his sister, and told me all about what he knew of the whole family. I was beginning to see just how softly aggressive Merritt was.
That's fantastic.
He was growing the brokerage business and was becoming a pretty good developer. He had introduced the owners of Banana Republic to Don Fisher. That was a damn good feather in his hat and enabled our firm to have another great merchant to represent. All of a sudden, I was beginning to watch as Merritt started to pull away from being just a merchant rep. He was starting to make a name for himself as a producer and director of retail stages. He really understood our business from the customer's point of view, and the merchants began to trust his ideas. It was like in a cloud of dust he left me behind, to become an admirer of his talent. We were strictly a merchant rep, while Merritt and his brother were landlords. Landlord reps and merchant reps. They were the whole enchilada.
You're the whole enchilada.
We were just the salsa.
Is this great?
The Sher family had all the smarts that ran circles around most of us. Well, Merritt was never intended to be a poor broker like the rest of us. I watched him to continue to produce and direct all his retail stages, not just here, but all over the country. There is so much more to this relationship that Merritt has no idea as to how much he had to do with my growth in the business.
Whoa.
Trust me when I say that I have always respected Merritt for his ingenuity, creativity, and salesmanship. Merritt, my hat is off to you, and I bow to your excellence as a human being, first as a father and husband, second as a developer, third as a hotel owner, fourth as a, fill in any noun that fits Merritt, and last as a retail real estate broker, both old school and up-to-date current school. Travel well wherever you go. Mike.
Anyway, we're going to go back to the beginning again, and I got to tell you that before Terranomics, well, before what I call the modern era Terranomics, which happens to be a number of us who are here, there was a guy who went to work for Merritt, and I remember him because he was brilliant at doing waterbed stores. His name's Wayne Mack here, right? So Wayne, I know you've got at least one or two words to say for Merritt, or about Merritt.
So, Merritt, I carry you with me all the time. I mean, Merritt hired me in 1972. I came out of Berkeley. I was a musician. I was a horn player in a soul band. Somehow or another, I responded to an ad in the San Francisco Chronicle that Merritt served up, and next thing you know, I'm being hired as this researcher for real estate projects that you were supposedly involved in. You decided, apparently you saw something in me. To this day, I don't quite understand what it was, but he decided he's going to train me to become a leasing agent. I didn't even know what the words meant back then. Next thing you know, I'm being trained as this waterbed guy because he had a relationship. Does anyone remember Interspace Environments?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, back in the day. I mean, they had a great product.
Oh yeah.
It was a good thing for me, but to this day, I mean, I carry you with me every day with the training you gave me and the insight, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I went and I met Merritt because he had just finished the transaction with the Gap organization for Banana Republic, and I said, oh, he understands retail and how to raise capital. So I went over there and called him up, and I said, hey, I'm looking for some money. And he said, well, come over and see me. I sit down with him in his office, and I'm talking to him, and he goes, yeah, you know, that Bookmania is not going to last because Crown's going to take over the world. But I really like your action, so why don't you come over here and work with us? Hey, I'll make you a partner.
So I'll tell you what, if you take this on, we'll do it. And I said, well, what's that mean? He says, well, I'll make you a partner.
And I remember the first day I met Merritt, we were on some project down in Springfield, Oregon, and everyone said, you're going to meet Merritt Sher, you're going to meet Merritt Sher. And so everyone was super tense, and this guy gets off the airplane, a white floppy hat kind of comes down, and everyone's saying, it's Merritt, you know, get ready for him. And so we go over to the site, and I had just graduated from graduate school, probably 6 months before that. And I remember, you know, doing all the numbers and just the typical things you do in school. And Merritt just says, drive around. And he goes, go in this way. And I said, well, do you want to go in and see the center? No. Just keep going around and around and around. And we could drive around for a half an hour, every which way in the shopping center. And he goes, this thing is not going to work. It's terrible. We shouldn't even touch this thing with a 10-foot pole. And for years after that, a whole bunch of leasing people tried and tried and tried to get this project to work, and it's never succeeded. And one of the things I learned from Merritt kind of from that, and it was sort of the springboard for me with Merritt, was he would send you off in all sorts of directions with a whole bunch of different thoughts about one specific issue. I remember for years and years I'd go this way and this way and this way, and I was always just exhausted, but just learning. And one of the things I realized was it developed my compass, my internal compass about this business, that I could, right now, after 24 years or so with Merritt, I can look at almost any situation and quickly do the whole parameters that I've ran down almost every avenue there is and say, this is the way we should go. I'm so thankful that you've been a part of my life. You've been a mentor, a father figure, a business partner. And I think part of kind of like what we all share here is Merritt treating us, or giving us that partner status. There's something about that you feel ownership immediately and pride. He shared the pride in the projects and his vision with those around him. And there's very few people in this business that do that. And so Merritt, thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I look forward to many more years hanging out with you and learning from you.
A couple of years ago, our entire company had a overnight party up at the hotel. So it was Chris and David and Ron's office and our office from Oakland, and everybody went up. And Merritt got up and he started to say something about one person. I don't remember who, but he wanted to say how important that person was. It might have been you. And then he went and he said it about another person, and then he realized he was sort of halfway into it. And he went around the room, and there was about 35 or 40 of us, and he said something poignant about every single person, and something specific and how much they meant to him or the organization. And everybody in the office still talks about it to this day.
I'm one of a long line of people, past, present, and future, that Merritt has collected. And I got collected at an elevator one day at 50 Cal. I was coming back from lunch after an interview with Manufacturers Hanover, trying to get into the banking business. Merritt's in the elevator listening to me, and I don't know what I was saying, and he, we get to a certain floor, he goes, well, you sound sort of interesting. Maybe you should come up and talk to me. Is this kind of a pickup line or what?
When I first realized his genius at convincing people to do things, we had 4 bankers from Mechanics Bank meet us, and they came really skeptical about the whole situation, and there was a lot of re-tenanting going on. And Merritt wanted to get like 75% financing with like no recourse, and basically asking for the world. And I was like, yeah, right, this is a long shot, forget it, it's never going to happen. So Merritt gets out there in the parking lot and starts waving his hands through the air like an artist painting on it, this invisible canvas that only Merritt saw. And I'm sitting there watching the bankers and watching Merritt, and they're starting to like ease up a little bit. And he actually started reminding me of this professor I had in college. I went to a totally non-sectarian school that convinced everyone that Yiddish literature was the most interesting class you could possibly take. And there's Merritt, similarly like a college professor, bouncing around and telling people how he's going to move all these tenants around and everything like that. And these people were just sitting there saying, wow. And by the time we got done with like an hour out in a parking lot, these guys like approved the deal. And I was thinking, wow, how did that ever happen? And I still think back on that day because I've seen, I've done financing for 25 plus years, and I've seen a lot of developers doing back of the envelope or on cocktail napkin drawings, but I've never to this day seen another situation where a developer drawing a picture on the wind on some invisible canvas, and that was the business plan. He got it approved, and good job, Merritt. It's been great working with you, and miraculous at times.
And a fellow named Mike McCormick, who I was friends with, said, because I was looking for money, says, well, you ought to go talk to this Merritt Sher guy. So I go down to 50 California, I make my pitch, and Merritt kind of looks at me with this quizzical look, and he says, well, that looks pretty good. He says, of course. He says, but there might be one condition.
Oh, God.
If I help you, will you help me on something? well, you know, I'm the guy looking for the money. He said, well, for sure. Little did I know he was doing the Merritt Sher thing. Whatever it is that Merritt could see in people, he could smell right away. Whether it was in an elevator or in a quick pitch, Merritt made a decision. And the offer was very similar. Oh yeah, I'll make you a partner.
Merritt and I met on an airplane. And we were delayed, and there was some kind of maneuvering to move luggage, you know, so I sit down, I do something with the luggage, I get some people to move something around and all. I sit down and Merritt says to me, "You're a deal maker." I'm going to read this piece, so I'm not going to go into how I ended up working for Merritt, but let's just say that I think it was about 2 or 3 months between that day and when I became a partner in his venture fund. My first day working for Merritt back in 1988 was also Terranomic's first day at the company's new office. Merritt had decided that my office would be next door to his. Construction was underway to implement one of Merritt's specifications. There was to be a door in the wall between our offices. The studs wouldn't allow for a normal-sized door, so this would be a very tiny door, approximately 24 inches wide. It took shape looking like a secret door. What was it for? What did it mean? It made me nervous. Over the next few years, I was to learn about the value of that door. Mostly, the door stood open and we talked through it. Merritt would start talking through some train of thought, tilting back in his chair, hands behind his head, eyes looking up at the ceiling, out to some beyond that I couldn't see. Sometimes Merritt would have something on his mind so immediate it would propel him out of his chair and into my office. He'd stand there towering over my little desk, about cranishly, hands waving as he tried to tame his thoughts to be understandable outside of his own head. Over those years, I learned Merritt's real door lesson. If you think there should be a door in a wall, make a door. Just do it.
Merritt always said, if you see somebody and you like them, then you hire them and then you figure out what they're going to do. Merritt decides if he likes you, or if he doesn't, it doesn't matter how good you are or which after all, he's not going to hire you. And Merritt is just a great, great judge of character.
I went off to try to win a Nobel Prize in literature. I have fallen short of that, but Merritt and I have kept the relationship up. I asked Merritt for a reference to the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is the place you want to go if you're a writer and doing graduate work. And Merritt wrote me a recommendation. I didn't get in. And I asked Merritt afterward, I said, "What'd you write?" And he said, "I told him you had no business going there, that you aren't made for that. You're cut out to do business. You never could be a professor if you tried." And he was absolutely right.
You know, he has so many ideas, and they are all really have something wonderful in them, but not all of them work consistently on their own. And so it's really exciting, the idea of going through this process, because there's something in everything he says that's really important to understand and to know what he's getting at. He knows it's there, but it's not fully formed. So it's a real process between everybody, and it brings us all together.
There's nothing I can tell you except that he created an environment in which I grew. It wasn't through contact with him, but it was just the environment and the thinking process that took place. I've never been any place that just had so much freedom of thought.
I get a call one day, I think it was late in '79, and there's a guy named Merritt Sher and says, "Why don't you think about us merging?" And I thought, this is exciting. What a great group. These guys are like, you know, the hot energy and retail brokerage business. Little did I realize what it was like herding wildcat. It was during the recession. We were running crazy, exciting as hell, and rebuilding the brokerage business. About a year later, after we got together, Merritt tells me, Russ, it's a recession. And Merritt says, things aren't going so well. I got this thing I can do with the Don Fisher at the Gap. So I'm gonna go run around with those guys. He said, here's you own the company, here's my share. I'm not your partner anymore. So then comes back, it's 2 years later, I was working on a deal with Mal O'Reilly doing development, which is what I really wanted to do. I said, Merritt, guess what? I really want to go do this development stuff, and I love this business, you've been great and all this stuff, but I'm going to go. So, Merritt, here's my share. That's the worst deal I've ever made. Bottom line is that I think about how many people in the entire industry just think about it. How many do you know that equal the creative ability of Merritt Sher? Nobody. There aren't anybody. And I say that with absolute admiration, respect, and especially because all of us, and me too, have been inspired by his creative genius.
Without going into details, all I would say is Merritt is truly an artist, and an artist in the most meaningful way. He produces things and has produced things that are so contributing to our environment and the people that use them. I've never met anyone like him. I'll never meet anyone like him again. He taught me everything I know, and I've been able to use that, I think with some discipline, to make my own achievements, and for that I'm eternally grateful. Thank you, Merritt.
But I can tell you, I've never known someone with so much kindness, integrity, thoughtfulness, attention to tiny details like the apple tree on 2nd Street by Cost Plus, the tiny plantings and one vine's not going this way, and at the same time be able to talk about a huge plan, a state of the world, someone so devoted to his family. I don't know anyone from the tiniest tenant up in Santa Rosa to any of the other people that we know in common that doesn't just adore Merritt as I do.
If anyone had asked me to describe you, if didn't know you, I would say you are a creative but humble man, dressed in humble clothing, which you do. And I'm also reminded of the fact that the real measure of a man's success is the number of friends he has. And by the comments that were made here today, the number of people here today, Merritt, you are highly successful. It's a pleasure to have known you and be your friend.
So we have Tracy here. This is your Lifetime Achievement Award. And it says in here, my wife came up with this, I think it's unbelievable. Thanks for all the things that stuck against the wall. Merritt, here's your award. All right, Merritt. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. But you can.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here, to hear all these accolades.
Shows they were listening, right?
This is, by the way, my wife Pam, and she's been woefully left out of this.
She likes being left out.
And so I have a little speech impairment these days. The secret of talking to me is ask me a question, and so when you come to a pass on the road, you say, would you say that again? And then the second or third time, I get it. And, but on a serious note, Nick's the best partner that I've ever had.
Rising, put him out! Come a long time!
I hope that's on the recording. Yeah, well, so it's just an incredible experience having worked with all these people and knowing that I had a part somehow to be involved in this. And so I think that's about enough.
Merritt always started a conversation by saying, I've been thinking. And we go into a conversation. And through that conversation would distill an idea that was exactly what should have been done for that point in time. And he was just that way.